So, there's this friend of mine who always avoids paying for meals. Every time we go out, she conveniently leaves without paying, and I end up covering the bill all the time. Once, she invited me to a hotel and suddenly told me to pay $1,500 for our stay. I was confused and asked her what she was talking about. She insisted that I should foot the bill for our lodging, which seemed completely unreasonable. I'm still shocked, but I've decided it's time to make her face reality. I'm Michelle, a 45-year-old office worker. I live with my husband of 18 years, our daughter in middle school, and our son in elementary school. Since both my husband and I work, we share household chores. Whoever has some free time does the dishes, and we work together to manage our daily lives. My husband is really involved with our kids, driving our daughter to sports activities and playing catch with our son. He's an awesome dad, and I feel fortunate to spend time with such a caring husband and adorable children. One day, someone disrupted my peaceful routine. While I was taking out the trash in the morning, my neighbor and fellow mom Susan asked if I wanted to go for coffee sometime. I hesitantly replied, "Coffee, really?" She explained that there's a new trendy cafe nearby with delicious Korean bread, and she thought we could go together. Although I wasn't too excited, I agreed to go on Saturday. Susan, who hadn't spoken much before, seemed really enthusiastic. I was initially planning to decline because I prefer spending my weekends with my family after a busy week of work, house chores, and taking care of the kids. However, Susan knew my children's schedules and mentioned that on Saturday, my daughter has sports and my son has plans with friends. Surprised, I asked her how she knew, and she cheerfully shared that she heard it from David, who is in the same sports activities as my daughter, and my son mentioned his plans. Feeling a bit pressured by Susan's good mood and information about my kids' plans, I reluctantly agreed to go to the cafe on Saturday. She left after setting the date and meeting place, and I found myself committed to our coffee outing. On Saturday, I was feeling a bit down because I had worked extra hours. We were supposed to meet at the station, but Susan was late, and she didn't apologize. Even when we reached the cafe, there was a long line, mostly of young people. I suggested going to another place, but Susan insisted on waiting because she really wanted to try the bread there. After an hour of waiting, we finally got a seat. Susan, feeling tired, commented that I should have gotten the drinks while we waited. I apologized, and despite my frustration, I smiled. The bread she recommended was indeed delicious, and I thought about bringing my family next time. As we were about to leave, Susan suddenly needed to use the restroom. I waited for 5 more minutes, feeling the stares of people waiting, and ended up paying the bill. After another 10 minutes outside, Susan came out, saying her stomach hurt a little. I asked about her condition, but she said she was fine and walked ahead of me. Trying to talk, Susan cut me off and insisted I choose a drink. Even when I declined, she pushed me to pick something. I chose tea, and she said it's on her, looking satisfied. I thanked her, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy. I wondered if she thought this covered the cost of coffee and bread. I didn't feel comfortable asking her to pay directly. As we arrived at the station, Susan quickly went home, saying she had something to do. After that, every time Susan invited me for tea, she never paid for it. Not only that, she kept asking about my family's activities from other people. On weekends, she left her kids with her in-laws and went out with friends, hardly being at home. Recently, she even left her kids with us to go out drinking on weekday nights. She checked when we would be home, brought her child before dinner, and said, "Take care of my child too." The kid enjoyed eating with us, but it was a burden for the adults. I asked if her husband was home, and she mentioned he's often on business trips. I wish she would at least contribute to the cost of food, considering we already have 2 grown children. But Susan just said, "It doesn't make much difference with just 2 more and left." Any homemaker would understand the financial strain. It's been a month since we started living this way, and the kids are on summer vacation. On the way home, Susan invited us to go out with our families. I was unsure because my husband had been approached by her earlier. Since Susan's husband would be home, she invited us during the holiday. I hesitated, thinking if it's with the family and her husband is there, it should be fine. My husband mentioned it to the kids, and they seemed excited. We agreed, and Susan and I decided on the time and place. On the day of the outing, her husband couldn't make it due to a sudden business trip. It would be just Susan and her 2 children. We followed behind in our own car to a rental campground with cottages, planning to stay overnight. While we prepared the barbecue, the kids were already playing. Once everything was ready, we started grilling the meat. We ordered food for 10 people, including 2 extra servings since Susan's husband couldn't make it. We ended up with 3 extra servings, and I was worried it might be too much. Breakfast is always the kids' favorite, but during summer break, figuring out lunch and dinner can be a bit of a hassle. Today, we decided to keep it simple by just grilling meat. While my husband and I were busy preparing and grilling meat, Susan just sat there, not doing anything, with a calm look on her face. She mentioned that we need to watch the kids properly, but she only watched them from a distance. When I called the children to eat, she grabbed some meat, saying, "Wow, that looks delicious." We were surprised, and Susan suddenly realized, "Oh, is this for the children?" I wanted to give it to the kids first, but since we were grilling more, I thought it would be okay. The kids looked disappointed, expecting an apology from Susan, but she just laughed and said, "You better eat quickly, or I'll eat it all up." My husband and kids were shocked. Then Susan ate even more meat than the growing children. We had planned for 1 lamb chop per person, but she had already eaten 4 and was reaching for more. "Susan, we only reserved 1 lamb chop per person. You've already had 2 extra ones for yourself and your husband, so please have something else. It might seem small, but we can't get more food because we reserved it." "There are limitations," I explained. "What? I can't eat what I want. That's not fair," she complained. I reminded her, "Didn't you know this when we made the reservation?" We planned and decided on the food together, even discussing ordering more because of our growing children. Susan insisted, "I don't eat much. I have a small appetite. Just count me as not there, and 1 extra portion should be fine for my kids and the men." I thought ordering for 10 people, including our 2 middle school kids who eat a lot, and 1 elementary school child, would be enough. But the meat was disappearing quickly. "My son wants that meat," my son said, reaching for it. But Susan grabbed it and ate it quickly. I was upset, and even my usually calm husband was getting annoyed. We couldn't strongly object because Susan's children were there. "Mom, don't act like a child," said Susan's daughter. Susan justified herself, saying, "Survival in camping means fighting over meat." The children were surprised by Susan's immature behavior. Later, we finished the barbecue, played outside for a bit, and decided to take a break. Since the cottages were separate, we could take a break from Susan and relax. Even though it was supposed to be fun, it felt tense, and my husband looked tired. He suggested, "Let's have breakfast and head home early tomorrow." We spent the rest of the time relaxing with our family and greeted the morning. Susan came out of her cottage cheerfully, saying, "Good morning." I replied, "Good morning. You're lively today." She said, "Of course." I ate a lot, relaxed, and had a great time. For breakfast, we had sandwiches provided, played a bit more, and then started preparing to leave. During the final payment, Susan was missing. I told my husband, and we looked around, but even Susan's children were not there. I asked the kids if they had seen her, and they said she mentioned going to the restroom and told them to go before leaving. When asked about payment, I requested the cashier to wait. After waiting for 10 more minutes, Susan hadn't returned. I went to check the restroom, but Susan and her kids were gone, and her car, which was supposed to be parked nearby, was missing too. What? My husband was surprised. It looked like Susan and her family had already left. I couldn't believe it. I was about to explode with anger. Inviting us and then leaving without paying was infuriating. The total cost of everything, including camping equipment, cottage stay, drinks, meat, and more, was nearly $900. Susan knew the approximate amount during the reservation, and she insisted on this place, which only allowed on-site payment. It seemed like a planned act now. We decided to go straight to Susan's house. "Susan, please open the door." After ringing the doorbell many times, Susan reluctantly opened it. "Susan, why did you leave without telling us?" I asked. "Huh? Didn't I say I was leaving?" She acted like she didn't know. "Susan, you need to pay now. Give us the money," I told her firmly. "Oh, I forgot. But I don't have any money right now," Susan replied. "We agreed on the amount beforehand, right? You set the budget." I hadn't mentioned it earlier, but I couldn't stay quiet any longer. However, she kept saying she had no money, so I asked, "What happened? You bought something you wanted before the camping trip." "Look," she said, laughing and showing off her purchase. "So you didn't have money during the camping trip?" I asked, getting a bit annoyed but still questioning her. "Yeah, I didn't have it when I reserved. So what?" I was fed up with Susan, who kept laughing without feeling sorry at all. "You planned this from the beginning," I said, and she replied, "Well, thanks to me inviting you. We had a great time. It's a win-win situation, isn't it?" So I confirmed one last time. "So you don't plan to pay? You're so persistent. It's embarrassing. I told you I don't have the money. When I get it, I'll pay you back. Or are you trying to get money from someone who doesn't have any?" With no shame and an unapologetic attitude, Susan laughed, and I reached my breaking point. "I see, understood." I went home without saying much and talked to my husband about what happened. Time passed, and Susan suggested, "Michelle, there's a tasty restaurant nearby. Let's go." She acted like the camping incident never happened. "I'm sorry, but I'm busy, so I can't go." I had been saying no to Susan's invites for a few months, getting impatient. Susan came up to me looking angry, saying, "Are you avoiding me? Still upset about the camping thing? A few hundred or a few $1,000s, it doesn't matter. I can't believe you'd avoid someone over that, even if it were a lot more." She ranted, really upset and talking fast. "Is that so, Susan? Let's plan a trip to an inn next time." I suggested going on a trip. "Huh? Oh, sure, you planned it. In that case, I'll have to check with my family." Susan became cheerful. I told her my husband gave me some alone time, thinking of a 2-night trip. When she asked if my husband would watch the kids, I said he was busy. To the unsure Susan, I said, "I plan to stay for 2 nights from Friday. If it's difficult, I'll go alone." She said she'd leave the kids with her husband's parents and join the trip. When I showed her the inn's exterior, Susan got even more excited. "I'll book 2 rooms. There seems to be space for all." I told her about the inn, and Susan started looking up things on her own. "How about I invite my friends too?" she said. So I told her I'd make all the reservations at once. A month later, it was the date of the inn reservation. Susan and her friends were at my house, looking confused. "Aren't you driving us?" "Oh, sorry, I have to stop by my in-laws, so let's go separately," I said, and Susan reluctantly agreed. We drove to the inn in different cars. "Wow, can't believe we're staying at such a nice place, Michelle." "Thanks." Everyone was amazed by the inn's beauty. "Let's enjoy our free time." Susan and her friends were having a great time, seeming to forget about me. The first day was just eating, bathing, and sleeping. After the bath, I found Susan and her friends having a secret talk. "Hey, Susan, can you really afford to stay at this expensive inn?" One of Susan's friends asked. "Yep, it's all on me," Susan bragged. "Amazing. It's over $1,000 per person per night. So generous. Then I'll turn off notifications for texts and calls and enjoy this dream world until we leave." Susan said she'd pay for everyone's stay, and everyone got excited. The next morning, they went to the spa for massages and had a meaningful time relaxing. I tried texting Susan, but she didn't read or reply. Even at night, it seemed she was having a good time. "Hello, Michelle. It's morning already," cheerful Susan called. "Ah, yes, that's right," I replied, wondering why I was stating the obvious. "You overslept, so it's your fault, right? We're going home first, so pay $155,000. Susan said something totally unexpected. Oversleep. $155,000. What are you talking about? I didn't understand what she meant. The person who comes last usually pays, right? Susan said. So I said, yeah, but I'm already home. Didn't you see my text? I had messaged Susan that I was going home. Oh, I wouldn't be looking at my phone in such an amazing place. I explained the situation to Susan. I went home on the second night because my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well. Originally, I was just picking up the kids and my husband, who were playing. But since my mother-in-law wasn't well, I left early. Why didn't you say something? Susan was angry. I told her my husband contacted me late, so I texted her. She asked about the bill, thinking I was avoiding paying my share. I reassured her, don't worry, I already paid. Oh, right, that's fine then. We just have to return the keys at the front desk and go home, Susan said, her tone calming down. Well, yes, since it's on-site payment, stop by the front desk. My part has been deducted. If the front desk did everything right, there shouldn't be a problem, I explained. You didn't pay, right? Susan asked again. No, I paid my part before leaving, so it's okay, I replied. However, Susan's next words made me uneasy. What about our part? With this question, I was sure Susan intended to make me pay. Please pay for yourselves. I heard after the bath that Susan, you were going to pay for your friends, right? Oh, well, that's... Susan stammered. You're amazing, honestly. I thought you were the worst for always disappearing when it's time to pay. So you really were going to pay back the money for the camp later. I misunderstood you, Susan. I'm sorry. I joked, building her up. Wait a minute. I cut off Susan's protest and said, tell me all about your wonderful time when you get back. See you later, and I hung up the phone. When I got home, my husband asked, are you okay? I smiled and said, yeah, I'm fine. Susan and the others had a great time. Later, Susan, who had promised to pay, somehow managed to use several credit cards. When Susan came back, she looked really bad, unlike when she left the inn. I never planned to pay, she yelled as she went home. According to what the kids heard from Susan's kids, her husband, back from a business trip, scolded her a lot. You have to earn and pay that big amount of $155,000 yourself, he said. She seemed to start working part-time. For Susan, who used to be lazy, leaving housework and childcare to others, it must be tough. She's working so hard that she has no time to rest, both physically and mentally. I don't get invites from Susan anymore, and I don't have to take care of her kids. I've been able to have a peaceful daily life. On holidays, I can spend time happily with my family, and that makes me very happy.